quick recap. I don't know anything. Asmir, essentially, Ollie Alexander has been accused of grooming. These rumors have been kind of circulating online for years, but essentially what happened is Milo Yiannopoulos has come out and he's starting to do a video series, essentially saying that the accusations are true. Is there a tipster raid? Thank you for the raid, tipster. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. LOL, who could have thought that? Yeah, so Andrew's going to be in with us shortly here. Let me just pull him in. Hello?
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you doing?
Good. You want me to turn my camera on?
Only if you want to. It's up to you.
Hang on a second.
Okay.
I think I probably can here. All right. There we go. Sorry. It's really cold today in Michigan.
Yeah.
So.
I can only imagine. Michigan is very far north, so.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive into this. This is wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So you got to start way back at the beginning. So this starts with Kanye West and kind of his freak out and his spurg out. Makes himself politically available. Makes himself politically available to basically some dissident right-wingers. Now, because he's politically available, tons of kind of these washed out right-wing dissidents such as Fuentes and America First and Milo Yiannopoulos and Ollie Alexander and all these different people who haven't been in the limelight for a while kind of see this huge opportunity to gather around this guy for mass publicity, which is what ended up happening. Right?
Yeah.
Now, Ollie Alexander, so you understand the characters here. He's been picked up. I mean, he's a career criminal, and he was picked up on, like I don't know if it was like wire fraud or check fraud.
I think it was card. Yeah, it was check fraud
something.
and theft, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
Was one of them.
So there's been rumors around the guy for years that what happened was, because this was an electronic violation, that the Fed seized his computer and found child pornography on it, and he's been an informant ever since. And that's not confirmed, right? But these are the types of rumors that are around Ollie Alexander. So fast forward this. Fuentes gets into bed with both Milo Yiannopoulos and Ollie Alexander, and both of them loathe each other. I mean, they absolutely hate each other. Yiannopoulos really hates Ollie Alexander. He has multiple communications back and forth with Fuentes, Yiannopoulos does, explaining that there's massive issues with this guy, that he has been DMing underage kids, that he has basically porn material, which is designed as blackmail material against various people who he's helped in his political career, and he exchanges political favors for sex or for nudes, pictures like this. So the guy's bad news. Tons of correspondence ended up getting leaked from Milo Yiannopoulos as him and Fuentes had a falling out. And in the correspondence, it seemingly proves that Fuentes had a pretty good grasp and understanding that Ollie Alexander himself was doing these things. So this was picked up all over the place, and there's been a war going on between Fuentes and Yiannopoulos ever since over these leaks. Now, the kind of fallout is whether or not Nick was party to it, meaning how much did this guy know? He claims that he didn't know much, but according to the DMs, he did have a pretty good understanding of what this guy was and chose to ignore it. Then he allowed both of these guys, who were, at least Ali Akbar now is proven to be a person who is grooming underage kids and soliciting them for nudes and things like this. He gave him a channel on his network, which is, of course, tailored towards young men, right? Basically bringing a pedophile to an all-you-can-eat buffet. So this is the kind of firestorm that this guy is dealing with.
Yeah.
So Fuentes comes out and he expresses in a Twitter space that Milo Yiannopoulos tried to hand him a drug and then sleep with him when they were out on the trail. Okay. So I confront Wurzelroot on this. What is it, yesterday or the day before or whatever. Okay, I confront Wurzelroot on this. And Wurzelroot backs off almost instantly and says, no, that was a joke. Milo didn't actually try to drug. But that was the counter narrative that they were trying to go with, right?
Yeah.
The counter narrative was that Milo Yiannopoulos essentially tried to drug Nick Fuentes and sleep with him. That was the Fuentes counter narrative. And it turns out that the counter narrative wasn't true, right? It wasn't true. Well, here's what actually happened. What actually happened was during the day, Yiannopoulos offered Fuentes, I don't know, something to take the edge off, some kind of prescription drug. I don't remember what it was. Okay. And then many hours later, they were in a hotel room with a single bed, and I guess he said that they could sleep in the same bed, though so far Yiannopoulos denies that, and Fuentes has offered no evidence of it. But even then, that's a whole different thing than he tried to drug me and rape me, right? Which is what he was heavily implying in this Twitter space. So at the moment, the Groypers and America First are experiencing a firestorm of essentially harboring pedophiles and knowingly doing so, after many people had already told them that this was going on. And Milo is continuing to release information daily to that effect, and it seems like it's really difficult to get around the fact that Nick Fuentes likely knew and intuitively understood that these guys were really bad news, and still allowed them in for the purpose of political expediency.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think I've heard Nick talk about basically teaming up with people who he doesn't particularly align with for political expediency, and he'll openly admit that. So I'm not surprised that he would do that. I am surprised that he would do that if he knew to the extent that, the extent that Ollie Alexander, what kind of person he was. It's interesting that they kind of made that rumor around Milo trying to sleep with Fuentes. Milo's type, I don't think, has ever been Fuentes. I think Milo is married to a black guy, and I think he's been he was. Yeah, I think they're still roommates.
Well,
but
the reason that the counter narrative and kind of counter offensive has been so flaccid is because it's for one reason. Yeah. Because it really doesn't matter how guilty Milo is of anything. Yeah. Regardless, Milo could have done the most horrific things that you can imagine, and it still would not save Fuentes from him having understanding of what this person was, what he was like, his foreknowledge of him admitting that he knows these things about him, and he's been hearing them for years, and he intuitively believes that they're true, and still going ahead and giving him access to an all-you-can-eat buffet of underage kids on his network, right? So this is a big problem. So even if the counter narrative is Milo's bad, which is what it is, right? Is that Milo's a bad person, he's a bad political actor, this type of thing. Yeah. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Even if you proved that Milo was horrible, it's still not going to save Fuentes from the firestorm. So yeah, and I don't think anybody within the dissident right or even in left-wing circles would deny that Milo is known for being kind of a backstabber and being kind of a snake. One thing I do tell people when kind of looking at this situation is Milo, it's kind of like half and half. Milo is known for making up some stuff, but he's also known for leaking stuff that is super credible. And for, when he leaks stuff, it tends to go crazy. It's stuff that nobody else has access to. Well, Milo, so Yiannopoulos learned a strategy very early on that it's far better to collect intelligence on people and then sit on it until it's politically expedient to release it. And usually that's going to be when they're either attacking you or you need them to be off of the political playing field. Yeah. So as far as blackmail goes, and Milo has also several accusations around the fact that there's a likelihood he himself is a federal informant. He seems to have made statements to that effect before. So it's difficult to ascertain exactly what's true, but he does have a history. He calls it the vault which is a hard drive full of blackmail information. And so Fuentes kind of, another counter argument he puts forward is like, hey, if you're going to blame me for having the pre-knowledge of this, then you also have to blame Milo because he had the pre-knowledge and didn't tell anybody, which again, even if true, kind of hurts Fuentes' credibility even more because, again, Milo was a huge part of the America First success story. So it's either a huge lapse in Fuentes' judgment and instincts, or he had some foreknowledge, and they're going to have to admit to one of those things.
Yeah. So one argument that I saw Nick Fuentes making about this whole situation is that, yes, these screenshots and the suspicion that Ollie Alexander, being a groomer, was on the internet for several years, but that there's so many accusations that come out of these dissident rights circles that you can never really know what exactly is true and what isn't true. What would you say in response to that?
Yeah, well, you don't need to. There's if you have good, solid evidence of what is true and both parties admit to it. So Nick Fuentes is not saying that the messages which were released from Milo Yiannopoulos and their correspondence back and forth is false. So we have a unique understanding that that's true because both parties have admitted that these correspondence are true. So Fuentes himself had to have had foreknowledge and his own intuition telling him that this guy was bad news, and he chose to ignore it for the purpose of political expediency, which is exactly the same type of criticism he would levy against other right-wing organizations, like during the Groyper Wars when they went after Charlie Kirk under the pretense of why do you have homosexuals at the spearhead of your movement? How's that going to help the right? And then kind of the contradiction back his way is like, wait a second, man. This is exactly the same tale told, except it's even worse because now we have kind of this underage grooming and pedophilia going on your camp, right?
Yeah, well, I think I remember seeing a clip of Fuentes talking about this, and he admits that the screenshots are real, but he says that the guy who is speaking about these is older than he is saying he is. And that was one of his claims, that yes, this was back when Ollie Alexander was into hedonism and living in degeneracy, but that the first interviewer or interviewee essentially was much older than he was claiming.
Are we talking about Smiley or are we talking about the other guy?
I think it was the first. I don't know who Smiley. I just know that it was the first one.
Smiley Groyper's the big one. So Smiley Groyper. The other ones, a lot of it was flirtation and things like this, which were released between Ollie Alexander and clear adults. However, Smiley Groyper, who's a person who is highly regarded inside of these AF circles, he's a nobody minion chatter, but he's well known. He was 15, and Ali Akbar solicited him for nudes, and he actually sent Ali Akbar the nudes.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's confirmed.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That is horrible.
Yeah, it is horrible. And Fuentes released a statement today on that, and it's mind-blowing actually what he says. Yeah. Fuentes says in both cases, Smiley and Lance, and he's talking about Lance Videos here. Lance Videos is a person who has yet to release all the information on his own allegations, but Fuentes is trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
He says they were willing to go along flirting with Ali to varying degrees without any protest because they thought it would advance their political careers. If you're flirting with an adult gay man because you think it's going to land you a job, you know full well what you're doing and it's gross. I'm sorry, but even at 15, he's referencing this kid, even at 15, I would never have sent nudes to an adult gay man. There's something wrong here. So at this point, he's again shifting the blame at this point off of the 15-year-old and the political operative who has been utilizing his network for these grooming processes, right? And he's shifting the blame onto this 15-year-old kid who was 15 at the time, right? Who actually did send this guy nudes, which I don't know why Ali's not in prison, right?
Yeah. I also remember seeing he posted also in his Telegram, he may have deleted it now, but something about like Me Too has gone too far in response to a lot of this stuff, which just seems like not timed well at all with all of this.
Well, it's kind of an ultimate irony, because Fuentes starts his counter narrative in his Twitter space by saying, "Me too, Milo tried to sleep with me," right?
Yeah.
But even if that's true that Milo did, he still wouldn't have any grounds, because under his own logic here with this most recent post, he's an adult, and there's, you know what I mean? There's there's no problem there, right? And he chose this association himself, and that still is not going to take away from the fact that clearly people within his own movement who are underage young kids, who is what AF attracts, of course pedophiles are going to be attracted to that. Just like they are in churches and schools and things like this. They go where the kids are, and they will clearly allow these people in their movements as officials inside of their movements for political expediency. That's the criticism.
There was somebody part of AF recently who was also in trouble. I believe his name was Latino Zoomer, who got in trouble for having explicit photos of children. Is that correct? Do you recall that?
Yeah, so that's not a thing that I follow closely. That's more of an A-log thing. These particular series of events, the only reason I've been covering them as closely as I have is because these are national characters now. This isn't just kind of these isolated movements. Ali Akbar was the head of the Stop the Steal, which was a massive campaign with a lot of money behind it. Mainstream politics was behind it. It was a big deal once upon a time. So having this guy involved in this kind of small, isolated online movement, and seeing that these guys will basically sell their souls to the people that they claim to hate the most in order to get political clout, it's beyond the pale.
Yeah. I almost wonder if there are other people, like other national figures, who are aware of Ali Alexander's actions.
Well, not only are there, but I don't remember which one it is. I think it was Owen Schroyer from the InfoWars, who he just came out in the last day or two and said that Ali Akbar tried to touch his penis several times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah. So there's going to be a lot more. There's going to be a lot more of this kind of you're going to find, once the floodgates open, it looks like Akbar himself is fleeing off the face of the earth. He's shutting down his social media and just kind of trying to disappear, while Groypers are in the midst of damage control, and a lot of it. Yeah.
So the one thing that I'll say about Ali Alexander is that I was aware of these screenshots floating around of Instagram messages, him flirting with young guys on Instagram and other social media, but I couldn't find any confirmation for sure that this was real. I think what Milo has done, where he has interviewed actual victims, I don't know how he did this. I don't know how he got into contact with them, but he got into contact with actual victims, has done interviews with them, has essentially confirmed everything. There's no denying it now.
So the other thing is the way that he's doing it is exactly what I would expect from an excellent political operative.
Yeah.
He's slowly turning up the heat, so that the responses to the various things that he releases, they end up telling a huge amount of lies. And once that happens, he can say, nope, that's a lie. Here's the evidence that that's a lie. They don't know what's coming next, so they have to be very careful in their responses, because they don't themselves know what's out there. So at this point, he's basically got them by the proverbial balls, right?
Yeah.
And there's not a whole lot they could do. The best kind of argument that they could come up with collectively is that Jaden McNeil has a super chatter named Ultros, who sends in tons and tons of money to Jaden, and the Groypers have a heavy suspicion that this guy may be a homosexual. What that has to do with anything on planet Earth or with Ali Akbar and what's going on there, I have no idea, but seemingly they're trying to draw this. What Fuentes did in his space was he said that this guy was funding all the opposition against him. And Wurzelroot named me as one of these people. They named Red Pill Gang as one of these people. Named many of these people. I've never taken a dime from Ultros, and I have no idea who he is, really. I've just seen him in this other guy's chat, right? I don't really think I've really talked to him outside of that ever. Certainly he's never funded me with anything. And same thing with almost everybody who covers this. So this is just really grasping at straws. They have no evidence of anything because there's no evidence there. So they're just trying to find any counter narrative they can find.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And Milo's chops as a political operative are definitely shining right now. Yeah, I guess I don't know. Like, what else do you think the audience should know as we go through this?
Well, this is going to get worse.
Okay.
A lot worse.
Yeah.
Many bombshells have been promised already to be dropped this week. They've already been teased. Some of us have seen some of the kind of teasing from it behind the scenes, and it's going to get worse. And so the thing is like, how far does this go? How many people are involved with Ali Akbar? This will break on the national news media at some point because it'll have to. Once you start getting underage kids who are sending in nudes and things like this, and of course they'll point at Fuentes and say, why is it that this guy is organizing with these people who he himself has had these DMs back and forth saying, I kind of am pretty sure that this is going on, but I'm just going to kind of turn a blind eye for the purpose of political expediency. And it's going to be horrendously damaging for this organization. Either way you cut it, either he knew and he didn't do anything, or he's incompetent and essentially, made huge value errors. So one way or the other, he's going to have to kind of answer for one or the other.
And
but so far, he just wants to double down.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. I'm looking at his Telegram right now. It's wild that he's writing paragraphs about this. I will be honest, like initially when Milo came out with the accusations, Milo has been wrong before on things that he's claimed, and he has been dishonest before, and he's pretty well known within the far right as a pretty snaky person, somebody who will backstab people, given the chance.
Seems like an odd kind of guy to get in bed with, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that's
seems seems like only an inept and incompetent leader would want to get into bed with a guy like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I it's interesting because I asked, I think, back when the Kanye stuff was happening, I asked Ethan and Big Tech. I asked Ethan and Ethan Ralph and Big Tech about, Milo is well known for being a snake and being a backstabber. And are you guys really okay working with him? And they were like, oh yeah, he's fine. He's a good guy. We have no problems with him.
Like, they've been apologizing for these on behalf of these guys, both of them.
Yeah.
For at this point, what, a couple of years, right? And this is a huge problem. I brought up the same criticisms with Ethan Ralph live, and Ethan Ralph has now doubled down on Twitter also and said it's going to take a lot more than this underage kid sending nudes to this guy for me to turn on him, considering he helped me get my Twitter account back. So he's basically expressing, like, I don't care, even if it's true, I'm not going to turn on this guy because of, again, political expediency. Help me get my Twitter back. He's very useful to me, and I will take him useful to me over the moral stance of exploiting underage. It's insane, right? That's insane.
Yeah, that is insane. Yeah. And it's, it's pretty wild because I hear all these conspiracies about other people coming from that sphere being pedophiles. So just the irony of it, I guess.
Well, it's an ultimate irony, in fact, because kind of the thing that they're spearheading against, or making the pretension of spearheading against the most, is against degeneracy. And they didn't used to necessarily be that way. They used to be a little less hard on degeneracy and go more with racial issues. But once they started to enter the mix of Kanye West, it's really hard at that point to push a white nationalist message if you're pushing a black rapper for president, right? That seems contrary to your kind of belief structure. So they kind of moved away from that and moved into what's going on the scene with transgenders and this kind of thing. Well, what's interesting is that the thing that they're warring against, it turns out that the people who are spearheading their organizations and are giving them the political contacts and everything else happen to be the very same shadow that they're chasing, right?
Yeah.
And this is it's kind of the ultimate irony of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When I was talking with different AF people about the Kanye stuff, when the Kanye stuff was happening, I said, to me, it seems like there's been a little bit of change in focus. It used to be that there was a very clear, at least focus on like white culture being the dominant culture. Even within this, right? That seemed to be a pretty important point. But now it seems that ever since he started working with Ye, ever since Nick started working with Ye, that's kind of fallen to the wayside.
Well, Kanye West's ultimate message is to love bomb. This is a kind of old strategy of of these people who want to try to deliver what they consider as a controversial, brutal message, and the way that they deliver it is by saying, "Now listen, I love everybody, but these people are doing some bad things, and but I still love them and forgive them and want them to come back in the fold." Well, that's not really how politics works, right? The love bombing campaign doesn't work really well when your divisionary ethno-nationalist message, that's what it is. You can't then just love bomb and say, well, we want to put you in different schools because we love you, right? It doesn't work out really well. So instead, what they've ended up having to do is kind of hyper-focus on the degeneracy aspect and abandon the racialism altogether. So the two main seeming components for AF at this point are to hyper-focus on Jews and hyper-focus on degeneracy and kind of abandon racial issues altogether. So that's kind of their pathway forward for the Ye 24, and they're desperately trying to hold on to that because it's the only thing that really has been able to propel Fuentes into the national media spotlight in a long time and give him the kind of attention that he wants for pushing his message. But it looks like that's falling apart quickly as well.
And you kind of are would it be correct to say that you're pretty Christian nationalist or
that would be a correct assessment.
Okay. Yeah. So how did you feel about having Kanye West kind of taking this very Christian view or goal, I guess, and then having Fuentes and Milo being attached to it?
Well, so West himself doesn't understand the political landscape at all. He's a mentally ill person who constantly has fits of mental illness. And when he does, he makes national headlines with the absurd and insane things that he says.
Yeah.
And because he has such a massive following, you basically have to kind of pay attention to it, right? There's no choice. He's one of the most famous men on planet Earth.
Yeah.
But what happened here was kind of the perfect political firestorm. Because he doesn't have a good understanding of the political landscape, he was ripe to be kind of moved in on by these dissident right-wing clout chasers who then turned his message into "I heart Hitler," which is an insane-ass message. Yeah. And then they started doing college tours with Dalton Clodfelter, where he would go on college campuses and say, that basically talk about the glory of Adolf Hitler and why we should forgive him and things. It's madness, right? This is exactly the opposite of how I would want to see Christian nationalism represented in the mainstream for the belief structure that I have. So is he a good representative of it, Kanye West? No. Is Nick Fuentes? No. Is Milo Yiannopoulos? No. None of these people are good for this. And most of the time, what these kind of dissident groups do is they take the Christian aspect of nationalism, what they really mean is ethno-nationalism, and they just use Christian nationalism. But try to understand, these are people who reject evolution, right, as I do. Right? They reject evolution as being true, but yet somehow still believe in race. Which is, how is that possible, that you can believe in the concept of race and reject evolution? It's an evolutionary concept, right?
Yeah.
And nobody ever puts them to these questions, and they've kind of used Christian nationalism as a shield to move a different agenda forward, and the Christ is King is just a shield for that agenda. And it's beyond obvious at this point.
Yeah, and I know for you specifically,
the reason Ollie Akbar hasn't been arrested yet could be because he's connected to
I just got a super chat. Sorry, give me a second here.
And he does have connections to the DC high ups. Just a thought.
So Winston Fujimori asks, do you guys think that the reason Ali Akbar hasn't been arrested yet could be because he's connected to federal assets? He
Yeah.
was
So.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
He was a close ally to neocon Karl Rove, and he does have connections to DC higher ups. Just a thought.
Yeah. So that's why when we started this conversation, it's long been thought that this guy was a federal informant and protected, and that what ended up happening, as often the FBI, CIA, whatever organization you want to point to will do, this guy was picked up on petty crimes that had to do with electronics. It's very possible they got a hold of his computer, and on the computer was things like CP or things like this, and they said, "Hey, listen, you know, you're gonna work for us, or else we're gonna throw your ass in prison for this." There's been a lot of speculation and accusations towards Akbar that the likelihood that he is a informant is very, very high. It wouldn't surprise me a bit if it comes out that he is. And it also wouldn't surprise me if the reason he hasn't been picked up and thrown in jail already since this broke is due to the fact that he has, you know, he's on their payroll. In fact, maybe they know, for all I know. You know what I mean? It's impossible to say. But that's, now, to be fair, this is complete speculation. I have no evidence to confirm any of this, and I'm not even making the allegation. I'm just explaining that these kinds of things have been circling around about this guy for a long time.
And I know
I think the truth is more damning than anything, right? So, anyway,
I mean, I know that you and Nick a while ago, a long time ago, or at least it seemed like you guys may have been friendly at some point in the past, but you guys split pretty quickly, or you kind of realized who he was, no? Or
nope. So my wife, she was a person who would occasionally consume that content, and she turned me on to the Charlie Kirk Graper Wars. Now, I thought that these were fantastic because what was happening was they were putting in Graper operatives into these different Charlie Kirk events and Turning Point USA and asking them how it is they think we're going to win the culture war by putting up the very people whose culture we're trying to get away from us, right? That was a brilliant strategy, and it worked out extremely well, and I enjoyed watching that quite a bit. And this was before I was ever involved in the internet at all. I was just some blue-collar asshole working, and still am, right? But at the time, I enjoyed that content a lot, and she sent in an occasional super chat because we supported that, what they were doing. Now, fast forward, and when Politically Provoked got popular, due to me, right? But when it got popular, they were moving towards the Graper side, and I expressed like, this is a terrible idea. Everything these people touch turns to absolute dog shit. You need to stay away from them. And we had discussed a potential debate between me and Fuentes. Those DMs were then leaked to try to like gitsy-backsy at me. And ever since then, AF has really wanted to just destroy my life. They've swatted me multiple times. It's it hasn't been pleasant. But they completely turned away from the original messaging, which is keen optics, Christianity, no degeneracy, and they turned it into the very same thing that they claim to hate, which is ethno-nationalism mixed with all kinds of bizarre incel bullshit. And I don't want anything to do with any of that. Never have.
And I know you've been pretty vocal about how race doesn't matter in your ideology. I think that's like something that, you know, people look at the dissident right and they automatically assume everybody within the dissident right thinks that race is something that's super important. I know that you yourself, I saw like a debate between JF Giureppe, Sean Last, you, and Rob Noor. And I think both you and Rob Noor were really good at pushing back on essentially what JF
this is one of the reasons that Grapers have had a fatwa and a kind of attempt to black me out from the scene, is because I actually only have the correct argument for Christian nationalism. The Christians do not accept evolution as being a truth claim. It's not a true statement. Because we reject that, we can't actually embrace the idea of race. That's an evolutionary concept. That's one. And then two, the conceptualization of delineation along racial lines in Christianity is absurd. And that's been made very clear as well. So I think that this is a significant cultural issue for sure, and a degenerate issue. But I think that for another thing too, if you were just looking at it from a purely pragmatic perspective, race is a fucking loser. You've got this nation's at what, like 68% white now.
How is race evolutionary?
It's dropping like a rock. The birth rates for whites in the United States are dropping like a rock. That's not going to turn around. And trying to hyper focus on this racial message, it's a total loser. Yeah. And eventually these guys will end up David Duked and Richard Spencered, where their influence will just kind of fall by the wayside because nobody's interested anymore in, well, you were saying this 20 years ago, but nothing's changed, because one thing that they never have is, even if you believe what they say, they never have a solution for you, ever. So, like, even if it's all true, what do you want to do about it? And they just kind of choke, right? They have no idea what they would want to do about it. Including, I remember that debate you just referenced. I asked Sean last that question. He said the same thing. I have no idea. I have no idea what we would actually do about it. And it's like, well, then what good is it anyway?
Yeah, that's a good point. You said that race is evolutionary. Somebody in chat just wanted to kind of ask if you could expand on that, what that exactly means.
Well, yeah, you would have to show me in the Bible where God made different races of people.
Yeah.
And
okay.
if he didn't, right, then you need to explain where they come from outside of an evolutionary model, and it can't be done.
Okay. Yeah.
It literally can't be done. And so you're either going to live with cognitive dissonance your whole life, or you're going to have to make some acceptances that your religion does not have an accounting for this.
Interesting. I guess that's all the questions that I had. Do you have anything else that you think I should know about this before diving in, or?
Well, I mean, just in context, try to understand that this is like kind of the beginning of a series of domino effects. I think they're beginning online to call Fuentes Titanic, right? Which I think is hilarious. And I don't think he's going to be able to walk away from this scandal. It's now I think that this guy, regardless of what he does, for several years to come, is always going to have kind of a rigid core following of people who've doubled down on him for years, and they're not going to back away. I mean, if Ethan Ralph has still a core of 400 or 500 supporters who just no matter what are never going to go away, then clearly Fuentes can keep that up too. But you can see the market of influence is beginning to wane, and if Kanye West was actually keen towards a 2024 run, and he started to try to bring political advisors who were savvy to his side, they would be like, you need to stay away from this dude. He's completely toxic, and basically everything he touches turns to garbage. So I think that AF is destined for nothing more than the online political sphere, and their IRL activism at this point has been effectively curtailed and destroyed by Yiannopoulos.
It's interesting that I'm just thinking about it now, but it seemed like the beginning of the end for even Spencer was something that Milo leaked on him. And when I interviewed Spencer and I asked him, what would you tell Fuentes if you had the chance to give him advice, he said, that people like Milo will stab you in the back, people will use you, etc. And it seemed, it seemed like decent advice, but it looked like what happened here is that Fuentes in his group were kind of, they knew that they were being used. They were very aware of that, but they were using back, and I guess they didn't expect it to backfire the way that it did. So it's interesting that Milo has been at the center of both of those huge. Well,
that's the core of the controversy.
Yeah.
The core of the controversy is not even how much Fuentes knew, though that would be nice to know. That'll make it even worse. But whether or not he was willing to replace his ideological principles for political expediency, and the answer to this is unequivocally yes. There's basically no getting around that.
Yeah.
And this is the thing to keep in mind going forward, because he has no answer for it, and there won't be an answer for it. He's kind of hoping in a few weeks it'll die down and get memory hold. This one's not going to get memory hold. People may end up in prison due to this scandal. It would not surprise me a bit. And I think he's kind of now going to be relegated to the online sphere and nothing more. And they say all the time, don't discount him. And it's like, well, I don't know. Been pretty correct thus far about how these things were going to play out, Stardust. So
Yeah. I mean, I won't deny that he is very good at connecting with people, and he's very good. He's aware of, like with Marjorie Taylor Greene, he was completely aware that Marjorie Taylor Greene was using him for his audience, but he felt that he was using her too. It was like a mutually beneficial thing. But yeah, it just seems like even if he is well connected and knows how to maneuver quite a bit, it just seems like he was too willing to excuse things from people as long as he could use them essentially for gain, I guess. So yeah. And the people that you choose really, it really does reflect later on if you don't choose the right people, if they're like morally bankrupt. So,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a huge problem for him.
Yeah.
Again, his organization, if you're going to promote from kind of your foundational principle, is the number one thing on our plate, above any type of racial issue, above immigration, above everything else, is the core ideological foundations of Christianity and what it teaches. This is the core of everything regarding our message. You don't have the luxury of corrupting those principles even once for political expediency. So what makes it such a hard message to push is that we're not perfect people, we're imperfect people, right? And so it's very easy for us to slide or sin or do something we shouldn't be doing. And I think you could always be kind of like remotely criticized, that guy BPF, he smokes. That's not a very Christian thing to do. Those seem like they're kind of, minuscule criticisms that I don't think would be a big deal. But if you're talking about a person who says the Christian message is that homosexuality is completely sinful and it's being pushed now as a social contagion and an ideology, but we're still going to utilize them to spearhead the front of our campaign messaging, you have this kind of huge cognitive dissonance issue at that point, which is if you dance with the devil, as the saying goes, the devil doesn't change, the devil changes you, right? And that's what they're dealing with right now. They don't have the luxury of giving up on their principles even once, not if that's the spearhead for their message. So they're kind of fucked, really.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that develops. I'm going to be going through all of the interviews Milo has put out so far, and then I'm going to go through basically AF responses to it. But yeah, I'm interested to see what else he puts out, because it's pretty damning what he has. Pretty damning. So.
Well, and it's, again, I think there's more to come. Yeah. And when you tip off that this guy has been at this for many years, the chances that there's a significant amount more victims is very, very high.
Yeah.
And the counter narrative of, oh, Milo's also bad, that doesn't do anything for him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, I think Milo said that there's something like 22 victims so far that he knows of, which is a crazy amount of victims that, as I was saying to my chat yesterday, where there's smoke, there's fire. By the way, I think Rachel said for you to check your text messages. She's in the chat.
Yeah, she just said that Nick Fuentes just posted the location docs of a sitting U.S. congressman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and just doxed the Roman residence of this person, the Rome residence, Rome, Georgia.
Oh.
And then sent over the screenshot. Do you want me to send it to you?
Oh no, I have it pulled up here. I just pulled.
Yeah. So that's breaking. He just doxed Marjorie Taylor Greene. So this type of fight, this is gloves off.
Oh my gosh.
Super brutal. Political fight. These people are all going to be doing everything that they can to destroy the opposition as fast as possible. But AF, I think, is going to get served up the short end of the stick here.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, that's really all I had. If you don't have anything else, Stardust,
I
I'll let
don't
you get
have
back to
anything
your
else.
show, but
I really
hope that
appreciate
helped
it. Yeah,
break
it helps
down
a
little
lot.
bit.
It helps a
Okay.
lot. Yeah. Thank you so
Well,
much.
Yep. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.